there is a profound and quiet crisis unfolding behind the manicured lawns of suburban neighborhoods and the glowing glass facades of corporate high-rises. It is a crisis not of economics or politics, but of the human psyche. You wake up to the sound of an alarm, and before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already hijacked by the external world. You reach for your phone, plunging instantly into a stream of emails, social media updates, and news alerts. From the very first second of consciousness, your attention is directed outward. You get dressed in clothes chosen to project a specific image. You commute through heavy traffic listening to podcasts that tell you how to optimize your productivity, and you step into a workplace where you must carefully manage every word and expression. You are performing. We are all performing. In the modern American landscape, this performance has become so seamless, so deeply ingrained in our daily routine, that we have entirely forgotten it is an act. Society has provided us with a very clear, meticulously structured blueprint for success. Get the right grades, attend a respectable university, secure a job with a solid 401k and health benefits, maintain an excellent credit score, and accumulate the visible markers of a successful life. We spend decades running on this treadmill, fueled by the promise that once we check all the boxes on this culturally approved list, we will finally feel complete. We will finally feel safe. But then, a strange and terrifying phenomenon occurs. You might be sitting in your car in the driveway after a long day at the office, the engine turned off, staring blankly at the garage door. Or perhaps it happens at 3 in the morning, when the house is completely silent and sleep refuses to come. In those rare, unguarded moments of stillness, when the noise of the world temporarily fades, you feel it. A hollow, aching sensation in the center of your chest. A creeping realization that despite having done everything right, despite having followed every rule and met every expectation, you feel entirely disconnected from your own life. It feels as though you are reading a script written by a stranger. This is the profound cognitive dissonance of our time. We are the most hyper-connected, hyper-stimulated, and externally validated generation in human history, yet we are drowning in an epidemic of loneliness, anxiety, and existential dread. We try to medicate this emptiness with mindless consumption. We scroll through infinite digital feeds, we buy things we do not need with money we do not have, and we chase fleeting dopamine hits to numb the discomfort of our own existence. We even turn to the modern wellness industry, treating meditation and self-care as just another set of metrics to master, another external goal to achieve. But the emptiness remains, because the solution we are seeking cannot be found in the external world. The pain you are feeling is not a sign that you have failed at life, rather, it is a profound psychological symptom indicating that you have successfully built a life for someone who does not actually exist. The renowned Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung identified this exact phenomenon nearly a century ago. He understood that in order to survive and function within society, every human being must construct a psychological mask. He called this mask the persona. In the context of modern American life, the persona is the professional LinkedIn profile, the curated Instagram feed, the agreeable neighbor, the dependable employee. The persona is necessary. It mediates our relationship with the outside world and allows us to navigate complex social structures. The tragedy, however, occurs when we mistake the mask for our true face. We pour so much energy into maintaining the persona, into seeking the approval and validation of others, that we completely lose contact with our inner selves. We become alienated from our own authentic desires, our own natural instincts, and our own profound psychological depths. Jung warned that a society entirely focused on the external world, on material accumulation and social status, would inevitably produce individuals who are fundamentally disconnected from their own souls. When you suppress your inner reality to conform to external demands, that suppressed energy does not simply disappear. It gets pushed down into the unconscious mind, gathering force, waiting in the dark. It begins to leak out as unexplained anxiety, sudden bouts of depression, chronic exhaustion, or a pervasive sense of meaninglessness. We are terrified of this inner world. We are terrified of silence. We fill every waking moment with noise, entertainment, and distraction because we are fundamentally afraid of what we might hear if we actually stop to listen to ourselves. We have been conditioned to believe that trusting ourselves is dangerous, that the inner world is a chaotic and irrational place, and that we must rely entirely on external authorities, experts, and societal norms to tell us who to be and how to live. But this complete reliance on the external world is exactly what is tearing us apart. The tension between the life you are performing and the truth of who you actually are is the root cause of your quiet despair. You are standing on the edge of a psychological abyss, looking at a life that looks perfect on paper but feels entirely hollow in reality. The question is no longer about how to achieve more external success, but rather how to bridge the terrifying chasm between the mask you wear and the soul you have neglected. To heal this divide, we must embark on a process that goes against everything modern society has taught us. We must turn our gaze inward. We must confront the very mechanisms of our own minds and understand the harsh, undeniable truths about how we have abandoned ourselves in exchange for societal approval. To understand why trusting our inner self feels so dangerous, so inherently unnatural to us today, we must first dissect the psychological architecture of the environment we inhabit. The abandonment of the authentic self is not an accident, it is a highly conditioned response, trained into us from the very beginning of our lives. Consider the standard trajectory of the American dream. From the moment we enter the educational system, we are subjected to a framework modeled after the industrial era. We are taught to sit still, follow rigid schedules, and memorize standardized information. Success is quantified by external metrics, letter grades, standardized test scores, and university rankings. Very early on, a profound psychological transaction takes place. We learn that love, approval, and security are conditional. They are granted only when we conform to the expectations of the authorities around us, parents, teachers, and eventually, corporate managers. In psychological terms, we begin to silence our internal locus of evaluation and replace it with an external one. We stop asking, "What feels true to me?" and start asking, "What do they want me to be?" By the time we enter the modern workforce, this conditioning is absolute. The American corporate landscape is a machine that thrives on predictability and compartmentalization. It demands a highly polished persona, the archetype of the flawless professional who is always productive, always positive, and entirely untethered from the messy realities of human emotion. But Carl Jung recognized a fundamental law of the human psyche: for every conscious adaptation we make, an equal and opposite force is generated in the unconscious. When we carve out this socially acceptable persona, we are simultaneously creating what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is the psychological dumping ground for everything we are taught to reject about ourselves. It is not necessarily evil, rather, it contains all the unlived, unexpressed parts of our humanity that society deems inconvenient or unprofitable. In a hyper-capitalist culture that equates human value with economic output, our shadow becomes dense with suppressed grief, raw creativity, vulnerability, and most notably, the biological need for rest. American culture views exhaustion as a status symbol and rest as a moral failing. Consequently, our natural human limitations are shoved into the shadow. The corporate executive who works 80-hour weeks and projects impenetrable confidence is actively suppressing immense vulnerability. The suburban parent who curates a flawless family image on social media is pushing their frustrations, resentments, and loss of identity deep into the unconscious. The tragedy is that you cannot selectively numb your psyche. When you suppress the unacceptable emotions, you inadvertently sever your connection to your intuition, your joy, and your authentic inner voice. Jung warned that the unconscious mind is not a passive storage unit, it is a dynamic, living ecosystem. When the shadow is ignored, it does not disappear, it ferments. It becomes autonomous and hostile. Because we refuse to acknowledge our internal reality, it forces its way into our external lives in destructive ways. This is the exact mechanism behind the profound neuroses of modern society. We see it in the explosion of anxiety disorders, chronic burnout, and the phenomenon of quiet quitting across the American workforce. These are not simply economic trends, they are collective psychological rebellions. The psyche is literally staging a strike against the tyranny of the persona. When the conscious mind refuses to slow down, the unconscious mind will orchestrate a panic attack or a depressive episode to force the body into submission. We attempt to biohack our way out of this distress. We download productivity apps to manage our time better, we take supplements to optimize our brain chemistry, and we consume endless self-help content designed to make us more efficient cogs in the machine. But as Jung famously stated, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. We are substituting the painful, legitimate suffering of self-discovery with the artificial suffering of endless self-optimization. This internal compartmentalization also projects outward, tearing at the fabric of society. Jung introduced the concept of psychological projection, the mechanism by which we take our own suppressed shadow and overlay it onto other people. When we are entirely disconnected from our inner selves, we cannot tolerate ambiguity or flaw within ourselves, so we must find a scapegoat. This is the hidden psychological engine driving the intense political and social polarization in contemporary America. We project our denied aggression, our unacknowledged fears, and our moral insecurities onto rival political factions, marginalized communities, or even our own neighbors. We become obsessed with pointing out the corruption and evil in the external world because it distracts us from the terrifying chaos within our own minds. It is much easier to fight a culture war on the internet than it is to sit in a quiet room and face the reality of your own unlived life. The system profits immensely from this distraction. A population that is alienated from its own intuition, deeply insecure, and constantly projecting its shadow is a highly profitable demographic. It is a population that will buy endlessly to soothe its anxiety, consume mindless entertainment to drown out the silence, and remain deeply dependent on external authorities to dictate its values. But eventually, a breaking point is reached. Jung identified this critical juncture as the midlife transition, though today, due to the extreme pressures of modern life, people are hitting this wall in their 30s or even their 20s. The breaking point occurs when the energy required to maintain the persona exceeds the energy you have left to live. The psychological infrastructure collapses. You achieve the promotion, you buy the house in the desirable zip code, you accumulate the wealth, and the promised feeling of salvation never arrives. Instead, you are met with an agonizing emptiness. The rules you followed so obediently have betrayed you. The external world, which you trusted to give you an identity, suddenly feels absurd and meaningless. You are left standing in the ruins of the life you built for other people, realizing that you have no idea who you actually are. It is a moment of profound psychological terror, a descent into the dark night of the soul. The masks have fallen off, the noise has stopped, and you are finally alone with the stranger you have been running from your entire life, yourself. The battle lines are drawn not in the boardroom or the ballot box, but in the deepest trenches of your own mind. You are trapped between a life that is no longer sustainable and a truth you do not yet know how to face. Yet, what feels like a catastrophic breakdown is, in reality, a profound psychological correction. This terrifying collapse of the life you thought you were supposed to live is not a malfunction, it is the beginning of a profound awakening. Carl Jung called this exact turning point the initiation into the process of individuation. Individuation is the ultimate goal of human psychological development, and it stands in direct opposition to everything the modern American self-help industry tries to sell you. We are constantly sold the idea of self-improvement, which usually means optimizing the persona to become more productive, more attractive, or more resilient to stress. But individuation is not about becoming better, it is about becoming whole. It is the courageous, often painful process of integrating the conscious mind with the deep, uncharted territories of the unconscious. It requires a radical shift in allegiance. You must stop outsourcing your truth to external authorities, corporate metrics, and societal expectations, and begin the quiet, monumental task of listening to your own soul. How do we actually do this in a society that demands our constant external participation? The answer is not escapism. You do not need to quit your corporate job, sell your house in the suburbs, and retreat to a cabin in the woods to find your authentic self. True psychological integration happens right in the middle of the chaos. The first step is to practice radical internal honesty. We must learn to sit with the discomfort of silence. When you feel that familiar spike of anxiety on a Sunday evening, or that sudden, inexplicable wave of grief during your commute, your conditioned response is to immediately reach for a distraction. You grab your phone, turn on the radio, or pour a drink to numb the sensation. Instead, you must learn to hold your ground. Observe the emotion without judging it or trying to fix it. Ask yourself what this neglected part of your psyche is trying to communicate. Often, the anxiety is simply your intuition screaming that a boundary has been crossed, that you are forcing yourself to engage in relationships or environments that are fundamentally hostile to your true nature. The second step is the withdrawal of your psychological projections. The next time you find yourself consumed by intense, irrational anger toward a political figure on the news, a frustrating coworker, or a family member, force yourself to pause. Jung taught that whatever deeply triggers us in others is almost always a disowned fragment of our own shadow. Ask yourself, what unacknowledged trait in myself am I currently attacking in them? Taking back these projections is like reclaiming vast amounts of stolen energy. You stop bleeding your life force into endless external conflicts and culture wars, and you redirect that energy inward to heal your own fractured psyche. This leads to the most liberating realization of the entire process, the renegotiation of the persona. Individuation does not mean you destroy the social mask. You still need to attend meetings, pay your mortgage, file your taxes, and navigate the complex social hierarchies of American life. But the relationship changes entirely. You realize that the persona is just a suit you wear for specific occasions, not the flesh and blood of who you are. You become the conscious actor rather than the captive character. When you no longer derive your core sense of worth from your job title, your credit score, or the approval of your peers, a profound psychological lightness takes over. The heavy, suffocating armor you have been wearing your entire adult life simply falls away. You can participate in the capitalist structure without allowing it to consume your soul. You can engage with society, but you are no longer a hostage to it. This is the art of trusting your inner self. It is the development of an unshakable internal sovereignty. When the economy fluctuates, when social narratives shift, or when personal tragedies strike, you will no longer be swept away by the external chaos because your foundation is anchored in the deepest truth of your own being. You transition from living a life of quiet desperation to a life of quiet power. You finally grant yourself the permission to be complex, flawed, and entirely authentic. And in doing so, you discover that the emptiness you spent your whole life running from was actually the vast, magnificent space where your true self was waiting to be born. Thank you for walking this quiet path of reflection with me today. Taking the time to look inward is a rare act of rebellion in our noisy world, and I appreciate you sharing this space with me. If these thoughts resonated with the deeper parts of your mind, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, and sharing your own experiences in the comments below. I read every single one, and your insights help build a community of genuine depth. This is Lucid Soma, reminding you that the most important voice you will ever hear is the one you have been taught to ignore. Until next time, take care of yourself and trust your journey.